5 years ago, my 3-year-old daughter lay beneath the fluorescent lights of a pediatric intensive care unit, fighting for every breath. The doctors had discovered a congenital abnormality pressing against her airway. The hospital could keep her stable for a short time, but the surgery she needed required a specialized pediatric thoracic team at another medical center. The receiving hospital had agreed to take her if her condition became immediately critical. But without insurance authorization or a verified financial guarantee, the out-of-network surgical team could not reserve the earliest operating slot. Every day of delay increased the chance that my daughter would need emergency surgery under far more dangerous conditions. The estimated cost was nearly $120,000. My husband, Malcolm, and I sold what we could. We emptied our savings, contacted charities, appealed the insurance decision, and called everyone we had ever helped. It was not enough. There was only one door left to knock on. The Hartley estate belonged to the people who had raised me and then erased me from their lives because I married a man they considered beneath us. They had never held my daughter. They had never sent her a birthday card. But I told myself no grandparent could look at a dying child and feel nothing. When the gates opened that night, music drifted through the rain. White flowers covered the garden. Guests in expensive clothing raised crystal glasses beneath strings of warm lights. My parents had committed hundreds of thousands of dollars to my younger sister's wedding weekend. I needed only enough to help save their granddaughter. 5 years later, those same parents walked into the offices of the company I had built from nothing. They no longer had the business, the influence, or the security they once used to judge me. This time, they were the ones asking to be saved. But before they ever sat across from me and begged, I had once knelt in front of them. And the answer they gave me that night changed my understanding of family forever. My name is Selena Reed. I am 34 years old now, and I run a design firm in Portland, Oregon, with my husband Malcolm. Most people who know me today know the company first. Reed plus Hart appears on construction signs, community development projects, boutique hotels, and architectural magazines. People sometimes describe our rise as inspiring, as though success arrived in a straight line from hardship to triumph. They do not know our first office was the corner of a one-bedroom apartment. They do not know we once chose between software fees and groceries. And they do not know that the name Hart came from the family that tried to erase me. I was born Selena Hartley, the eldest daughter of Gregory and Eleanor Hartley. The Hartleys were known throughout Portland for their luxury furniture business. My grandfather started with a small workshop, but my father transformed it into a regional brand with showrooms, private clients, and the kind of reputation that made wealthy people feel even wealthier. My father believed presentation was a form of power. He wore tailored jackets to breakfast meetings and spoke about the Hartley name as if it were a living thing that had to be protected from contamination. My mother treated our home the way she treated a showroom. Everything had a proper place, including her daughters. I was expected to attend the right school, join the right organizations, wear the right clothes, and eventually marry the right man. My younger sister, Sierra, understood the rules better than I did. She learned when to smile, when to remain silent, and how to make our parents feel that every decision had been their idea. She was not unintelligent or helpless. She was skilled at surviving inside the system they created. I survived differently. I asked questions. When I was 15, I redesigned the layout of one of our showrooms because customers kept missing the handcrafted collection in the back. Sales improved after my father reluctantly approved the change. He praised the result in front of the sales team, then told me privately that my talent belonged to the Hartley legacy. That sentence stayed with me. My talent belonged to the family. My future belonged to the family. Even my marriage, apparently, belonged to the family. By the time I graduated from college, my parents had already selected Jasper Langford as the man they believed I should marry. Jasper was the son of a state senator and a young attorney with political connections. He was handsome in the polished, deliberate way. Certain men are handsome because everything about them has been practiced. He knew which wine to order, which charity events to attend, and how long to hold another man's hand during a handshake. At family dinners, He praised my father's vision and asked my mother about social boards. In private, he asked different questions. How much property did Hartley Furniture own? Was the main building held by the company or by my father personally? Did my parents have a family trust? Would I inherit voting control? At first, I assumed he was simply interested in the business. Then I noticed he never asked what I wanted to design, where I hoped to live, or whether I even wanted children. One evening, after dinner at my parents' house, Jasper asked me to walk with him through the garden. My mother watched from the windows with the expression of someone waiting for a performance to begin. Jasper carried 2 glasses of wine. "I've been speaking with your father," he said. "That sounds dangerous." He smiled, as though I had made a charming joke. "He wants stability for you. He wants control. Those are often the same thing." "Not to me." Jasper stopped near the stone fountain. "If we married, certain things would need to be clarified. Zoals ownership, voting rights, trust distributions." I stared at him. "You're proposing a merger." "I'm being practical." "You haven't proposed anything. We both know where this is going." "No, you know where my parents want it to go." His smile faded slightly. "You're approaching this emotionally. Marriage is emotional. Marriage is also structural." He began describing a prenuptial agreement that would place my future Hartley interests under carefully managed control. He used words such as protection, continuity, and alignment. He never used the word love. That conversation ended any uncertainty I had. Jasper did not want me. He wanted the position I represented. My parents called him practical. I called him a warning. I met Malcolm Reed while working on a community renovation project. He was a young architect taking on more responsibility than he was being paid for. He wore old boots, carried a sketchbook with torn corners, and listened carefully when people spoke. The project involved converting an abandoned building into affordable studio apartments. Most of the design team focused on fitting the maximum number of units into the structure. Malcolm kept asking how the future residents would feel inside them. Where would an elderly tenant sit in the morning light? Could a mother cook while still seeing her child? Could storage be built into the walls so people did not have to choose between furniture and space? He saw buildings the way I did, not as impressive objects, but as containers for human lives. Our relationship developed through late meetings, shared coffee, and long conversations about the meaning of home. Malcolm never tried to rescue me from my family. He simply gave me the courage to admit I did not want the life they had chosen. When I introduced him to my parents, my father asked about his income before asking about his work. My mother asked whether Malcolm's parents had attended college. Jasper happened to be at dinner that night. He watched Malcolm the way a buyer evaluates damaged property. After Malcolm left, my father closed the dining room doors. "This is not serious," he said. "It is serious to me. You are confusing attention with compatibility. I love him." My mother's expression collapsed, but the tears that followed were not born from grief. They came from humiliation. "Do you understand what people will say?" she asked. "About what?" "That you rejected Jasper Langford for a struggling architect from a working-class family." There it was. Not whether Malcolm was kind. Not whether he respected me. Not whether I was happy. What would people say? Sierra sat near the window, twisting the stem of her wineglass. She did not look at me. My father stood. "If you walk out of this house with that man, you walk out of this family." The room became completely still. I had heard threats from him before. A cancelled trip, a frozen account, a withdrawn opportunity. But this was different. "You don't mean that." "I have never meant anything more." My mother reached for my hand. "End this now. You will thank us later." I pulled away. For years, I had tried to become acceptable without disappearing. I had believed that if I succeeded enough, worked hard enough, and explained myself clearly enough, my parents would eventually see me as a person rather than an investment. Standing in that room, I finally understood that their love had conditions. Obedience. Presentation. Usefulness. Malcolm was waiting in his truck beyond the gate. I could see the headlights through the windows. My father folded his arms. "Choose carefully." I did. I walked out. Our wedding took place at a courthouse 3 weeks later. Two of Malcolm's friends served as witnesses. There were no flowers, musicians, or formal photographs. We ate dinner afterward at a small Italian restaurant and split a slice of chocolate cake. I should have felt only joy. Instead, part of me kept expecting the phone to ring. I thought my mother would soften. I thought Sierra might send a message. I thought my father would realize that losing a daughter was too high a price for controlling her marriage. 4 days after the wedding, a courier delivered a thick envelope. Inside was a letter from my parents' attorney confirming that Gregory and Eleanor Hartley had amended their revocable family trust. I had been removed as a beneficiary. My name had also been deleted from future succession documents connected to Hartley Furniture. There was a second envelope containing several personal items from my old bedroom. No note, no congratulations, no invitation to return. Only proof that my father had not spoken in anger. He had spoken as a businessman terminating an unsuccessful investment. Malcolm and I moved into a one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Portland. The floors creaked whenever someone crossed the living room. One kitchen window refused to close completely, and winter air slipped through the frame no matter how many towels we pressed against it. Our couch came from a second-hand store. Our dining table had belonged to Malcolm's aunt. Most of our dishes did not match. I loved it. Every object in that apartment had been chosen by us. No one inspected the arrangement or told me which colors reflected badly on the family. Malcolm built shelves from leftover wood, and I painted the walls a soft gray using discounted cans from a hardware store. The apartment was imperfect, but it was honest. Malcolm worked as an independent architect, which sounded more impressive than it was. Some months he had several projects. Other months he spent more time chasing unpaid invoices than designing buildings. I found a position as a junior project coordinator at a mid-sized design company. The salary barely covered rent, food, transportation, and student debt, but I learned how projects actually survived outside glossy presentations. I learned to negotiate with contractors, calm, anxious clients, revise budgets, and solve mistakes before they became disasters. We talked often about opening our own studio. At first, those conversations were fantasies we shared while eating noodles on the floor. We imagined creating thoughtful spaces for ordinary families, small businesses, schools, and community organizations. Luxury design had always seemed obsessed with showing people how much money a client possessed. I wanted to show people how much dignity a space could give them. Malcolm's parents, Robert and June Reed, lived in a modest house about 40 minutes away. Robert had worked in maintenance and construction for most of his life. June had been a school cafeteria manager before retiring. They did not speak in dramatic declarations, but they showed up. When our car battery died, Robert arrived with jumper cables. When I became sick during my first winter away from the Hartleys, June brought soup and stayed long enough to wash the dishes without announcing that she had done it. They never treated me like a temporary visitor. They also never demanded that I call them mom or dad. They seemed to understand that affection could not be forced. The first time I truly understood the difference between June and my mother happened after Tessa was born. I had barely slept for several nights. My body hurt, the apartment was a mess, and Tessa cried every time I tried to put her down. June arrived carrying a bag of groceries. I apologized for the laundry on the couch. She looked at me as though I had apologized for breathing. "Give me the baby," she said. "I should be able to handle this." "Why?" "I'm her mother. And mothers are human." She held Tessa against her shoulder while I ate a warm meal for the first time that day. My own mother had always turned care into a lesson. Every favor came with an invisible record of what I owed. June never kept score. Behind Robert and June's house was a narrow piece of land bordered by old trees. Robert grew vegetables there and kept a small workshop near the back fence. The property had belonged to his father, who had used it for fruit trees and storage. A local developer had been trying to buy it for years because surrounding property values were rising. One afternoon, Malcolm and I were helping Robert repair the garden fence when his phone rang. After the call, he shook his head. "The developer again?" Malcolm asked. Robert nodded. "He increased the offer." June looked over from the porch. "Enough to fix the roof?" Enough to fix every roof we'll ever have. Malcolm laughed. Then why not consider it? Robert drove a nail into the fence post. Because money disappears, land waits. He looked across the garden. It's the only thing my father left that I can still touch. One day, it'll be yours. Malcolm told him we did not need it, but Robert refused to discuss selling. At the time, the conversation seemed ordinary. I did not understand that years later, the value of that land would be measured in something far greater than money. 2 years after our courthouse wedding, I discovered I was pregnant. I had been feeling exhausted for weeks, but exhaustion had become normal. When the test turned positive, I sat on the bathroom floor and stared at it until Malcolm knocked on the door. "Are you all right?" I opened it and held up the test. He looked at me, then at the test, then back at me. "Is that—" "Yes." He cried first. We were terrified. Our savings were small, our apartment was cramped, and neither of us had stable benefits. But beneath the fear was a joy so powerful that I felt it changing the shape of my life. When our daughter was born, we named her Tessa. She arrived with a sharp cry and a head of dark curls. Malcolm held her as if the entire universe had been placed in his arms. June cried when she first saw her. Robert stood beside the hospital bed, blinking too often and pretending the room was dusty. The day after we returned home, I sent a short message to my mother. I did not ask her to forgive me. I did not invite her into our lives. I simply wrote, "Her name is Tessa. She is healthy and she is beautiful." For a week, there was no response. Then an email arrived from my mother's formal account. "You made your choice. We will respect the distance you created. We will not be involved." It was signed Eleanor Hartley. I read it while Tessa slept against my chest. I did not cry, because I missed my mother. I cried because my daughter had been rejected before she was old enough to recognize a face. Malcolm found me on the couch and sat beside me. "You don't have to keep opening the door for them," he said. "I know, but part of me still believed time might change them." It did not. Tessa's first smile, first tooth, first steps, and first birthday passed without acknowledgement from the Hartleys. Long before their formal wedding weekend, Sierra and Jasper were already presented publicly as a power couple. They appeared together at charity events, political fundraisers, and Hartley business functions. Sierra never contacted me. Meanwhile, Robert and June became Tessa's grandparents in every way that mattered. Robert built her a small wooden chair. June kept extra clothes at their house, even though Tessa rarely stayed overnight. When Tessa began speaking, she called them Grandpa Robert and Grandma June, with such confidence that it seemed impossible they were not connected by blood. One evening, Malcolm asked whether I regretted leaving my old life. Tessa was asleep between us on the couch, one hand curled around my finger. "I miss what I thought my family could have been," I said, "but I don't miss what it was." For 3 years, I believed love could compensate for everything we lacked. Then winter arrived early. Tessa developed a cough. At first, we treated it like any seasonal illness. We used a humidifier, made soup, checked her temperature, and kept her home from preschool. The cough remained. Then she began sleeping in the afternoon. She stopped finishing meals. Her skin grew pale. One night, she paused while playing, pressed both hands against her chest, and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. "Mama," she whispered, "I can't breathe." Before I could reach her, her knees buckled. I carried Tessa to the car without putting on shoes. Malcolm was meeting a client across town, and I called him as I drove. I barely remember what I said. I remember red lights, wet streets, and Tessa's shallow breathing from the back seat. At the emergency department, nurses took her from my arms before I finished explaining. I sat beneath the bright hallway lights with my hands clenched together, staring at a pair of closed doors. Malcolm arrived 20 minutes later. His face was white. "What happened?" "I don't know." It took several hours for the specialists to explain. Tessa had been born with a rare congenital abnormality near one of her lungs. As she grew, the tissue had expanded and begun pressing against her airway. The condition had not appeared during routine examinations because it had remained small and inactive. Now, It was interfering with her breathing. The pediatric surgeon showed us the scans. "She needs surgery," he said. "Not tonight, but soon. We can keep her stable here temporarily, with oxygen, medication, and monitoring. The operation itself needs to be performed by a specialized thoracic team at the Children's Medical Center." "How soon?" Malcolm asked. The doctor paused. "Days, not weeks." That answer changed everything. The hospital did not refuse to treat Tessa. They admitted her, stabilized her, and began coordinating with the specialty center. But the financial counselor explained that the surgeon and part of the receiving team were outside our insurance network. Our coverage situation was already complicated. Malcolm had recently ended a long-term contract that included temporary health benefits. We had enrolled in a new plan, but the transition created a gap in authorization for specialized out-of-network treatment. The specialty center had agreed to receive Tessa if her condition became immediately unstable. But without insurance approval or a verified financial guarantee, the surgical team could not reserve the earliest operating slot. Each day of delay increased the risk that Tessa would require emergency surgery under worse conditions. The projected balance, including transfer, surgery, specialized equipment, and recovery, was nearly $120,000. The counselor helped us file an expedited insurance appeal. She gave us applications for pediatric assistance funds and hospital charity programs. One organization approved a small emergency grant, but the money would take time to process. Time had become the one thing we could not purchase. Malcolm sold his truck the next morning. It was the vehicle he used to visit construction sites, carry plans, and transport equipment. The buyer knew he was desperate and offered less than it was worth. Malcolm accepted. We withdrew every dollar from our savings account. I called my employer and asked whether I could borrow against future wages. The answer was no, though several coworkers offered personal help. Malcolm contacted former clients, asking them to pay outstanding balances early. Some agreed. Others avoided his calls. One client who had repeatedly praised Malcolm promised to advance several $1,000s, then stopped answering the phone when the paperwork arrived. I watched Malcolm leave message after message. His voice remained polite. His hands did not. By the final call, they were shaking. We appealed the insurance decision. The insurer requested additional medical documentation. The doctor provided it immediately. The appeal remained under review. We contacted charities. One required a committee meeting scheduled for the following week. Another said its emergency fund had already been exhausted for the month. Friends donated what they could. $500, $1,000, $20, $50. Every amount mattered. The total still left an enormous gap. We sat beside Tessa's hospital bed while she slept with oxygen beneath her nose. "I can sell my equipment," Malcolm said. "You need it to work." "I need her alive." "I know." He pressed both hands against his face. For the first time since I had met him, Malcolm looked completely powerless. Robert and June arrived that afternoon. June sat beside Tessa and read stories, even though Tessa could barely keep her eyes open. Robert asked the financial counselor several questions. How much is needed immediately? What kind of guarantee will they accept? Would verified funds in escrow be sufficient? Could a purchase agreement support an advance? I noticed the specificity of his questions, but I assumed he was trying to understand the situation. Later, I found him alone near the vending machines, speaking quietly on the phone. "Yes," he said, "I understand the offer is still valid." He paused. "I need to know how quickly you can move." He looked up when he saw me and ended the call. "Who was that?" "Someone who may know someone." "Robert, you don't need to solve this." He gave me a tired smile. "Neither do you. But here we are." That same day, my phone showed a local lifestyle article about Sierra's upcoming wedding celebrations. The headline praised the union between two prominent Portland families. The article described an entire wedding weekend: private dinners, a garden event, a formal ceremony, and a reception expected to attract nearly 200 guests. It also mentioned that Jasper Langford had recently begun advising Hartley Furniture on expansion and investment strategy. I stared at Sierra's photograph. She wore a silk dress and smiled beside Jasper, beneath an arrangement of white roses. I did not resent her wedding. I resented the fact that my parents could spend more on flowers, food, and photographs than the amount required to help save their granddaughter. Still, I resisted calling. Malcolm knew what I was thinking. "No," he said softly, "they can afford it. They chose not to know her. She's still their granddaughter. Selena, I'm not asking them to accept me." He took my hand. "If you go there, they will hurt you. They can't hurt me more than losing her." He had no answer to that. By evening, the medical team warned us that Tessa's oxygen levels were becoming harder to maintain. They adjusted her medication and placed her under closer observation. The specialty center needed financial confirmation by the following day if the earliest operating slot was to be held. I gathered the scans, estimates, and appeal documents into a folder. Malcolm stood beside the hospital window. "I'll go with you." "No. You should not face them alone. If they see you, they'll make this about our marriage. It has always been about our marriage. I need them to see Tessa." Malcolm closed his eyes. Then he nodded. I drove toward the Hartley estate through cold rain. For the entire journey, I rehearsed what I would say. I would be calm. I would offer a repayment agreement. I would sign anything reasonable. I would not accuse them. I would not discuss the past. I would speak only about a 3-year-old child who needed surgery. When I reached the gates, they were open. Cars lined the drive. Valets carried umbrellas. Music drifted through the garden. For a moment, I thought I had come to the wrong place. Then I saw Sierra's initials beside Jasper's on a white floral arch. I had arrived during one of the main events of their wedding weekend. The woman at the entrance did not recognize me. I gave her my name and watched her expression change. Inside, guests moved beneath strings of lights. Waiters carried champagne. A quartet played near the terrace. My mother stood beside a group of women wearing pearls and pale dresses. My father was speaking to Jasper near the garden steps. Everything looked beautiful. That was what my parents had always valued most. I held Tessa's medical folder against my chest and walked toward them. My father saw me first. The smile disappeared from his face. He excused himself from the men around him and crossed the terrace quickly. "What are you doing here?" "I need to speak with you." "This is not the time." "It's Tessa." He glanced at the nearby guests. "Lower your voice. She's in the hospital." My mother had noticed the disturbance. She approached with Sierra behind her. Eleanor's eyes moved over my wet coat and tired face. "You cannot come here like this," she whispered. "People are watching." I tried calling. "You have not called us in years. You told me not to." Sierra stood several feet away. Her champagne-colored dress shimmered under the lights. For 1 second, our eyes met. I saw surprise, perhaps even concern. Then Jasper appeared beside her, and her expression closed. My father motioned toward a side corridor leading away from the terrace. 5 minutes. We entered a sitting room near the back of the house. My mother, Sierra, and Jasper followed. I placed the folder on a table. "Tessa has a congenital defect near her lung. It's compressing her airway. She needs surgery at the Children's Medical Center." No one spoke. "The current hospital can keep her stable for a short time. The specialty center can take her if she becomes critical, but without financial authorization, they cannot guarantee the earliest surgical slot." My mother's face tightened. "What exactly are you asking?" "A loan. A guarantee. Anything that allows the team to reserve the surgery before her condition becomes worse." I looked at my father. "I'll sign a repayment agreement. Malcolm and I will make monthly payments. You can secure it against our future business income." My father opened the folder and glanced at the estimate. "You expect me to provide this amount immediately?" "I expect you to help save your granddaughter." Eleanor folded her arms. "You cannot disappear for years and arrive during your sister's celebration demanding money." "I didn't disappear. You removed me. That was your choice." "No. Marrying Malcolm was my choice. Erasing me was yours." Gregory shut the folder. "We have committed substantial funds to this wedding weekend. Vendors, guests, security, catering. Everything is already arranged. I'm not asking you to cancel the wedding." "Then where do you imagine the money will come from?" I stared at him. Hartley Furniture owned multiple properties. My parents had investments, accounts, and credit lines. A financial guarantee would not destroy them. You can afford it. That is not the issue. What is the issue? My father looked at Malcolm's name on one of the documents. The issue is that you made a decision against every warning we gave you. You insisted you could build a life without this family. Now, the first time that life becomes difficult, you return expecting us to rescue you. This isn't about rescuing me. It is always about you, Selena. My mother stepped closer. We told you there would be consequences. For Tessa, you chose the environment she was born into. The words struck harder than I expected. I looked at Sierra. She shifted her weight but said nothing. You know her name, I said. You know she's 3 years old. Sierra looked toward the doorway. This is not my decision. You could ask them. Selena. You could say she matters more than one dinner, one flower arrangement, one photograph. Jasper gave a quiet laugh. Everyone turned toward him. He lifted one shoulder. I'm sorry, but this is exactly what your parents warned you about. What? You rejected security because you wanted to prove you were different. You chose a man who couldn't provide the life you had. My hands began to shake. Do not speak about my husband. If you had married into a stable family, your child would not be waiting for strangers to approve her treatment. You think this proves I should have married you? It proves choices have costs. For one moment, the room disappeared behind a wave of anger. Then I remembered Tessa. I remembered the oxygen line beneath her nose. I turned back to my father. I don't care what you think of Malcolm. I don't care what you think of me. I will sign whatever protects you financially. No. One word. No hesitation. No sorrow. My father pushed the folder toward me. I will not be manipulated during Sierra's wedding. I felt something inside me break. Not dignity. That had already become irrelevant. Hope. I lowered myself to my knees. My mother inhaled sharply. Selena, get up. I looked at my father from the floor where I had once played as a child. I am begging you. His face hardened. She cannot breathe. The doctors say we have days. Please. Several voices had gathered beyond the partly open door. Guests were watching from the corridor. My father noticed them. That should have embarrassed him. Instead, it made him colder. Stand up, please. You are creating a spectacle. I don't care. Well, I do. I reached for his sleeve. He stepped away. My mother turned her face. Sierra remained beside Jasper, silent. That silence answered every question I had ever asked about her. I stood slowly. My knees hurt, but the pain felt distant. I gathered the folder. Jasper spoke as I passed him. You always thought love was enough. I stopped at the doorway. No, I said. I thought human decency was. I walked through the terrace while dozens of guests pretended not to stare. The music resumed before I reached the front steps. Rain soaked through my coat as I returned to the car. I drove to the hospital without remembering most of the road. Malcolm was waiting near the nurse's station. He saw my face and understood. They said no. I nodded. His jaw tightened, but he did not ask what they had said. He held me while I tried to remain standing. The surgeon met us a few minutes later. Tessa's breathing is worsening. We need confirmation from the specialty center tonight if we are going to keep the earliest surgical slot. I felt the hallway tilt. Then the elevator doors opened. Robert and June stepped out. They were accompanied by a man carrying a leather document case. Robert walked directly toward us and handed Malcolm a folder. What is this? Malcolm asked. A binding purchase agreement. I stared at Robert. The man beside him introduced himself as an attorney representing the developer who had pursued the land behind Robert's house for years. Robert had not completed the sale in a single evening. The title process, final closing, and formal transfer would still take several weeks. But the developer had agreed to sign a binding contract immediately and provide an emergency advance secured against the purchase. The advance would be placed in escrow and verified by the Children's Medical Center. The amount was enough to reserve Tessa's surgery and support the transfer. Malcolm looked at his father as though he had spoken in another language. You sold the land? Robert nodded. You said you would never sell it. I changed my mind. Dad, that land was Grandpa's. Robert looked toward Tessa's room. And she is my granddaughter. June placed both hands around mine. We can grow vegetables somewhere else. I could not speak. These people had less money than my parents spent on a single weekend, yet they had surrendered the only inheritance they possessed. I'll buy it back, I whispered. Someday, I swear. Robert shook his head. Do not turn this into a debt. It is everything you had. No. He looked at Malcolm, then at me. You are everything we have. The specialty center accepted the escrow verification. Within hours, Tessa was transferred by pediatric ambulance. The surgeons prepared the operating room before sunrise. Malcolm and I stood beside her bed as the nurses moved around us. Tessa opened her eyes briefly. Mama? I'm here. Am I going home? Soon. I kissed her forehead. You're going to sleep for a while. When you wake up, breathing will be easier. She looked at Malcolm. Daddy too? I'll be right outside, he said. The nurse began rolling the bed away. I walked beside it until the double doors stopped me. The last thing I saw was Tessa's small hand disappearing beneath a blanket. The doors closed. Robert's land had given us a chance. But none of us knew whether the sacrifice had come in time. Tessa's surgery lasted more than 6 hours. Time inside a surgical waiting room does not move normally. Minutes expand. Every pair of footsteps sounds important. Every opening door feels like a verdict. Malcolm paced until exhaustion forced him into a chair. June held a small paper cup of coffee without drinking it. Robert sat beside her with both hands resting on his knees. I kept thinking about the garden, the fruit trees, the old workshop, Robert standing beside the fence and saying land waits. My father had refused to sign a financial guarantee because he believed helping us would weaken his authority. Robert had signed away the only physical inheritance his father left him because Tessa needed a chance to live. The contrast was so painful that I could barely look at him. You should not have had to do that, I said. Robert looked toward the operating room doors. Neither should she. A nurse came twice with updates. The procedure was progressing. The surgical team had found the abnormal tissue and was working to remove the compression without damaging the airway. The third update took longer. By then, I had begun imagining every possible disaster. When the surgeon finally appeared, he removed his cap. The operation went well. For a moment, no one moved. The obstruction was more extensive than the scans suggested, but we were able to remove it. Her airway is open, and her lung is responding. The next 24 hours are important, but right now she is stable. Malcolm covered his face. June began to cry. Robert stood and looked away. I thanked the surgeon repeatedly until words became meaningless. Tessa remained in intensive care for several days. She developed a fever after surgery, and one night her oxygen level dropped enough to terrify us again. The doctors treated the complication, but recovery was not immediate. Tessa woke frightened and disoriented. She pulled at the monitoring wires and cried whenever a nurse approached. For weeks afterward, she panicked at the sight of medical gloves. At home, she sometimes woke in the night gasping even when she was breathing normally. Her body was healing faster than her fear. So was mine. I blamed myself for not discovering the condition sooner. Every cough from another room sent me running. Every pause in her breathing while she slept made my heart race. Malcolm tried to reassure me, but he was carrying his own fear. One evening, after Tessa had been home for several weeks, he found me sitting beside her bed long after she fell asleep. You need rest, he said. What if something changes? The doctors said she's recovering. They missed it before. No one missed it. It was hidden. I'm her mother, and you took her to the hospital after she collapsed. His voice sharpened. So did I. Do you think I don't replay it? I looked at him. He leaned against the doorframe. I sold the truck. I called people who lied to me. I watched you walk into that house alone because I couldn't give you another option. His eyes filled. I feel like I failed too. The anger left me. We stood in the dark hallway holding each other, both of us understanding that surviving a crisis did not automatically heal the people who survived it. Saving Tessa's life also did not end our financial problems. The surgical guarantee had secured the earliest slot, but recovery, medication, follow-up treatment, and unpaid work created more pressure. Then people began showing up. A teacher from Tessa's preschool organized a small fundraiser. One of my former coworkers brought groceries and an envelope containing several $100s. A neighbor who barely knew us left $50 beneath our apartment door with a note that said, "For your little girl." A woman named Marianne Cole contacted me after hearing about Tessa through a community center where I had once volunteered. Years earlier, I had helped design a temporary event space for a group of single mothers starting small businesses. I had done the work without charging because the center had no design budget. Marianne remembered me. She visited the hospital and handed Malcolm a check from the organization's emergency fund. "We cannot cover everything," she said, "but we can make sure you do not lose your home while your daughter recovers." I did not know how to accept that kind of kindness. "Why are you doing this?" "Because somebody helped me when my son was sick." She smiled gently. "That is how this is supposed to work." No one who helped us asked what kind of husband I had chosen. No one demanded influence over our decisions. No one used generosity to establish authority. They simply saw a family in pain and stepped closer. When Tessa finally returned to preschool, she lasted only 2 hours before asking to come home. June began spending mornings with her so I could return to work gradually. She never treated my anxiety as foolish. One afternoon, I apologized for calling to check on Tessa for the 4th time. June laughed softly. "You can call 10 times. You must think I'm losing my mind. I think your child almost died." That was all. No judgment. No lesson. Just understanding. At night, I sat beside Tessa's bed and listened to the quiet rhythm of air moving through her lungs. For months after the surgery, I dreamed about the Hartley estate. In the dreams, I was still on my knees, while music played beyond the door. I would wake angry. Then I would walk into Tessa's room and remember that she was alive because other people had chosen love. That realization became more powerful than my anger. I made a promise to myself. I would never again allow my family's survival to depend on the mercy of people who viewed compassion as weakness. I began taking additional courses in project management, interior planning, business finance, and branding. Malcolm and I revisited the idea of our own studio. This time, it was not a fantasy. We had skills. We had experience. We had learned how quickly financial insecurity could become life-threatening. We wanted to build a company that served people excluded from expensive design firms, working families, neighborhood businesses, community organizations, and affordable housing groups. Malcolm would lead architectural work and technical coordination. I would handle spatial design, client strategy, project planning, and business development. We called it Reed plus Heart. Reed honored the family that had chosen me. Heart was not a tribute to Gregory and Eleanor. It was a reclamation of the part of myself they believed they had the power to erase. Our first office was the corner of our living room. Our first official client was a woman opening a small bakery. She had spent most of her savings on equipment and could not afford the kind of design firm that usually appeared in magazines. We created a warm, efficient space, using reclaimed materials and inexpensive lighting. When the bakery opened, she hugged me and said, "You made this feel like something I deserve." That sentence mattered more than any award I would receive later. Marianne Cole remained in contact. Several months after Tessa's recovery, she called about an affordable housing project needing design support. The budget was small and the constraints were difficult, but the opportunity could become Reed plus Hart's first significant contract. Before we submitted our proposal, I received a card at the office. There was no return address. Inside was a brief message in my mother's handwriting. "We heard Tessa recovered. We are pleased she is well." There was no apology. No acknowledgement of the night I had knelt before them. No mention of Robert's sacrifice. I placed the card in a drawer and did not respond. Around the same time, I noticed Sierra's account appearing among the viewers of Reed plus Hart's online posts. She never liked anything. She never commented. She simply watched. I assumed curiosity had brought them back to the edge of my life. I was wrong. They were not watching because they missed me. They were watching to see what I might eventually become worth. Marianne's affordable housing project nearly destroyed us before it helped us grow. The building was old, the budget was limited, and every inspection revealed another problem. Pipes needed replacement. Several walls contained unsafe materials. The original floor plans were incomplete. A larger firm had already declined the project. Malcolm and I accepted it because the residents deserved better than neglect, disguised as affordability. We redesigned storage, improved natural light, and created shared spaces where families could gather without sacrificing privacy. We selected durable materials that looked warm rather than institutional. The project earned almost no profit. It also became the most important work we had done. Photographs of the completed building circulated through local housing organizations. Marianne introduced us to nonprofit directors, small developers, and city planners. One project became 3. 3 became 7. Growth was not immediate. There were months when we struggled to make payroll. A restaurant client canceled after construction had begun. A contractor's mistake forced us to absorb costs we could not easily afford. Our most dangerous setback came during the renovation of a neighborhood childcare center. A subcontractor installed the wrong flooring material in several rooms. The product failed a safety inspection and had to be removed. The subcontractor blamed the supplier. The supplier blamed the specifications. The client blamed us. The replacement cost was large enough to threaten the company. Malcolm wanted to fight the subcontractor and delay completion until responsibility was established. I wanted to replace the floor immediately and argue later. "We cannot carry this cost," he said. "We cannot leave children in an unfinished building. If we pay now, we may not make payroll. If we wait, the center may lose its operating license." For the first time, our values did not produce the same decision. We argued until after midnight. Malcolm accused me of risking the company because I could not tolerate disappointing anyone. I accused him of protecting the balance sheet more than the people depending on us. The words hurt because both contained some truth. In the end, we secured a short-term business line, replaced the flooring, and pursued the subcontractor through mediation. We recovered only part of the cost. For nearly 6 months, Malcolm and I reduced our own salaries. 2 employees offered to delay bonuses without being asked. That experience changed the way we operated. We improved contracts, strengthened quality controls, and built a reserve fund. It also reminded us that Reed plus Hart could not survive on good intentions alone. Over nearly 5 years, the company moved from our living room into a small studio, then into a larger downtown office. We hired a project coordinator, 2 designers, and additional architectural staff. We began handling community spaces, small commercial developments, and selected hospitality projects. Our reputation grew because clients trusted us. I completed professional certification in project management and expanded my credentials in commercial interior design. Malcolm maintained responsibility for licensed architectural work. When journalists eventually wrote about us, they often focused on the story of a disowned daughter building something from nothing. I preferred when they discussed the work. As soon as we were financially stable, I began repaying the people who had helped us during Tessa's illness. Some accepted the money. Many refused. I donated equivalent amounts to pediatric medical assistance funds when they would not take repayment. The most important promise remained Robert's land. The developer had completed the purchase several weeks after Tessa's surgery and incorporated the parcel into a larger holding. I contacted him through an attorney and offered to buy it back. He refused. A year later, I tried again. This time, the price was far higher than what he had paid Robert. I continued saving. Robert never asked about the land. He seemed content seeing Tessa run through his smaller backyard, healthy and loud. I was not content. I wanted him to know that his sacrifice had not disappeared into our success. During this period, Reed plus Hart received an unusual proposal. A development company wanted us to join a luxury residential project outside Portland. The projected fees were larger than any contract we had signed. The financial structure, however, felt wrong. Several companies appeared between the developer and the source of the investment. Malcolm reviewed the documents, and found the name Langford Advisory attached to one of them. Jesper. The proposal did not come directly from him, but the connection was clear. I declined. 2 weeks later, Jasper called my office. My assistant transferred him, before realizing who he was. "Selena," he said warmly, as though we had last spoken over dinner instead of beside the place where I had begged for my daughter's life. "What do you want?" "To congratulate you. For refusing your project?" He laughed. Still suspicious. Still alive. There was a pause. "I heard your company is expanding. We are doing fine." "That is not an answer. It is the only one you're getting." He spoke about investment, scale, and the limitations of remaining a boutique firm. His language reminded me of the questions he once asked about Hartley Furniture. Assets. Leverage. Control. "You should reconsider," he said. "Opportunities like this do not return. Neither do some mistakes." I ended the call. Months later, Hartley Furniture closed one of its showrooms. The official statement described it as consolidation. Then several suppliers filed claims over delayed payments. My father appeared in a business article beside Jasper, insisting the company was entering a strategic period of expansion. I recognized the expression on Gregory's face. He was frightened. But he was also too proud to admit that the son-in-law he had chosen might be leading him somewhere dangerous. My mother began sending occasional messages. "Congratulations on your award. We saw the article. Your father is pleased the Hartley talent was recognized." The wording angered me. My work had become acceptable only after strangers praised it. She still treated my success as evidence of Hartley's superiority, rather than proof that they had underestimated me. I did not answer. Then, Sierra sent a message. "I know we have not spoken in a long time. I hope Tessa is well." I stared at it for several minutes. She could have asked about Tessa at any point during the previous 5 years. Instead, her next line read, "Are you still interested in family property matters?" I deleted the message. Not long afterward, my assistant received a call from someone claiming to represent the Hartleys. The caller asked whether Reed plus Hart accepted private investment and whether I personally held a controlling interest. My assistant shared nothing. The signs were small, but together they formed a pattern. They were measuring me. At the same time, public records showed additional liens connected to Hartley Furniture. A property notice indicated that the family estate had been pledged as security for business obligations. I asked our attorney Daniel Cho to look at the filing. He returned with a short explanation. "The house is collateral for several loans. Some appear connected to development companies represented by Langford. Does my father understand that?" He signed the documents. "That was not my question." Daniel closed the file. People often understand what they hope will happen, not what the documents permit. I thought about Gregory's certainty the night I left home. He had believed control made him safe. Now he had handed control to Jasper, because Jasper looked like the kind of man who should be trusted. A week later, a formal notice connected to the Hartley estate appeared in the public property records. Foreclosure proceedings had not yet begun, but the lender had issued a notice of default. The marble house where my father once told me I no longer belonged was no longer secure. Jasper's collapse began quietly, and then became public all at once. A former client filed a civil lawsuit accusing one of his affiliated companies of misrepresenting investment risks. Another complaint followed. Then, a local financial publication reported that several Langford-linked development entities had transferred funds between one another shortly before defaulting. The allegations included inflated property values, undisclosed conflicts of interest, and misuse of borrowed money. Jasper denied everything. 2 weeks later, he disappeared from the Hartley Furniture Board. Sierra removed his name from her social media profiles. My father issued a statement claiming the family company had been misled by external advisors. That explanation was only partly true. Jasper had manipulated him, but Gregory had ignored warnings because he wanted what Jasper promised: expansion, influence, and prestige. Hartley Furniture had borrowed aggressively against company property. The estate had been pledged as additional security. When the projects failed, the debts remained. Sierra moved back into the mansion after separating from Jasper. She did not take responsibility for the decisions that had benefited her. She posted old photographs from happier years and wrote captions about loyalty, betrayal, and rebuilding. My mother called me on a Tuesday morning. I almost did not answer. Something made me accept the call. Selena? Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. Yes. Your father is unwell. What happened? Stress. His blood pressure. The business. Is he in the hospital? No. Then why are you calling? Silence. We may lose the house. There it was. Not an apology. Not a question about Tessa. The house. How much? We need $180,000 to stop the immediate proceedings and negotiate with the lender. And the company? Most of it will be sold. What about Jasper? He abandoned Sierra. I closed my eyes. And now you want me to save everyone. We want to speak with you. Send the documents to my attorney. Selena, this is a family matter. You made money a family matter when you refused to help Tessa. My mother began to cry. We were wrong. It was the first time she had said those words. But before I could respond, she added, we were under pressure. Sierra's wedding had already been planned. Your father believed helping you would create more conflict. The apology disappeared beneath the explanation. Send the documents. She agreed. Daniel reviewed everything. The debt was real. The lender could move forward against the house. $180,000 would not erase all obligations, but it could delay foreclosure and create room for a negotiated sale. The estate was worth substantially more than the immediate default amount. That fact mattered. My parents were not facing the street. They were facing the loss of a mansion and the status attached to it. If they sold the property honestly, paid the lender, and moved into a smaller home, they would survive. They did not need rescue. They wanted preservation. Among the lender documents was a title instruction prepared several months earlier. It stated that once the default was cured, Gregory intended to transfer the estate into a newly formed family trust. The listed successor beneficiary had been redacted from the copy sent to Daniel. Could be estate planning, he said. Or Sierra. Do not assume until you have evidence. I tried not to. While my parents' crisis unfolded, I received a call from the company that owned Robert's old land. They were changing development plans and were willing to sell the parcel separately. The price was painful. I agreed. Several weeks later, Malcolm and I invited Robert and June to dinner. Tessa, now 8 years old, helped set the table. She knew we had a surprise, but not what it was. After dessert, I placed a wooden box in front of Robert. He looked suspicious. What did you do? Open it. Inside was the deed transferring the land back to him and June. Robert read the first page without speaking. June covered her mouth. Malcolm placed a hand on his father's shoulder. It's yours again. Robert looked at me. You should have used this money for Tessa. Tessa is healthy. For the company. The company is healthy. For your future. I smiled. This is part of my future. He shook his head. We never expected repayment. This is not repayment. What is it? A promise I made outside an operating room. Robert's eyes filled, though he pretended to examine the deed again. You know, he said. The trees may be gone. Then we'll plant new ones. That evening reminded me why I had agreed to meet my parents at all. I did not want them homeless. I did not want revenge to make me cruel. I wanted to know whether they were capable of accepting help without turning it into another reward for Sierra. The answer arrived before the meeting. My phone buzzed while I was reviewing the lender documents. The message came from Sierra. Once Mom gets Selena to cover the foreclosure, Dad will transfer the house to me. Selena doesn't need to know. I read it twice. A second message appeared. Wrong person. Then, please ignore that. I took screenshots. I did not answer. The message removed all ambiguity from the redacted title instruction. My money was expected to preserve the house so Sierra could receive it. Even now, after the business had collapsed and Jasper had abandoned them, my parents were preparing to use me as the responsible daughter while rewarding the favored one. I sent the screenshot to Daniel. He called immediately. Do not accuse them before they explain. I won't. Do you still want the meeting? Yes. Why? Because I want to hear whether they will lie while the truth is sitting in front of them. The meeting was scheduled for Friday morning at Reed plus Hart. My parents arrived exactly on time. Through the glass wall of the conference room, I watched them walk past the reception desk. My father leaned on a cane. My mother held her handbag with both hands. They looked older, smaller, and strangely ordinary. For years, I had imagined them as permanent figures beneath the lights of the Hartley estate. Now they were simply two people who had made choices and reached the consequences. They entered the conference room believing they were there to persuade me to save their house. On the table between us lay the default notice, the title instruction, and the message Sierra never wanted me to read. My parents sat across from me in silence. No one offered a hug. Daniel occupied a chair near the end of the table. He was present to explain the financial documents, not to speak for me. My father looked around the conference room. Through the glass walls, employees moved between desks. Plans covered one surface. Photographs of completed community projects hung in the hallway. "You've done well," he said. It was not praise. It was an assessment. "We have work to do," I replied. My mother's eyes moved toward a framed photograph of Tessa standing beside Malcolm at a project opening. "She looks healthy." "She is. I'm glad. You had 5 years to tell her that." Eleanor looked down. Gregory cleared his throat. "We are not here to argue about the past. The past is the reason you are here. We need to address the house. Then address it." Daniel slid a summary across the table. "The immediate default is approximately $180,000, he said. "The total secured obligations are substantially higher. The estate has enough value to be sold, pay the urgent debt, and potentially leave funds for relocation." My father's face tightened. "We are not selling the house." "Then what is your plan?" I asked. "Your mother told you. She told me you wanted money. A bridge loan. Secured by what?" "The property. The property already has multiple claims. We can create an agreement." "And how would you repay me?" "Once the business litigation is resolved, the company is being sold." Gregory looked at Daniel. "This conversation should remain within the family." Daniel did not respond. I leaned back. "Tell me how the debt happened." My father's jaw moved. "Jasper misrepresented several investments. You signed the loans. On his advice. You used the estate as collateral. He assured us the expansion would increase company value. You believed him because he had connections. I believed him because he was qualified. You believed him because he looked like the son you wanted." My mother flinched. "This is not fair." I looked at her. "What part?" "Your father has lost almost everything. So did Robert when he signed away his land. That was his decision." "Yes." I held her gaze. "He made that decision to save a child he had no biological obligation to love." My father shifted in his chair. "We understand that mistakes were made." "Do you?" "We should have helped." The words sounded rehearsed. "Why didn't you?" "You arrived during Sierra's wedding event and created pressure." "No." My voice remained calm. "Do not turn the conditions of my begging into the reason you refused." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We thought if we gave in, you would continue returning whenever your choices created problems." Tessa's lungs were not a consequence designed to teach me obedience. No one spoke. I placed another document on the table. "I am not going to pay the foreclosure directly." My father's face reddened. "Then why did you bring us here?" "Because I am willing to make sure you have somewhere safe to live." My mother looked up. "What does that mean?" "I will pay directly for a modest apartment for 1 year while the estate is sold. Daniel can arrange financial counseling and help negotiate with the lender. If Dad needs medical care, I will make sure it is covered appropriately." Gregory stared at me. "You expect us to move into an apartment?" "I expect you to live within your means. This house has belonged to our family for decades. And the land Robert sold had belonged to his family for longer." "That is not the same." "It is exactly the same. He was willing to lose property to protect a life. You are being asked to lose property so you can protect yourselves." My father struck the table with his palm. "You have the money." "Yes." The answer silenced him. I did not pretend poverty. Reed plus Hart was successful. I could have stopped the immediate foreclosure without destroying our company. That was what they had counted on. "You could help us and barely notice the amount," he said. "I would notice what the money protected." Our home. Sierra's inheritance. My mother froze. I placed the title instruction beside the default notice. What is this? Gregory did not reach for it. Preliminary estate planning. Who was supposed to receive the property? That had not been decided. I unlocked my phone and turned the screen toward them. Sierra's message filled the display. Once Mom gets Selena to cover the foreclosure, Dad will transfer the house to me. Selena doesn't need to know. My mother closed her eyes. My father stared at the message. When did she send this? He asked. Yesterday. She misunderstood. Then explain it. Eleanor spoke first. Sierra has nowhere stable to go. She has options. Jasper left her with nothing. She spent years benefiting from him. She is your sister. So I should pay $180,000 to preserve a mansion for her. We thought the house should remain in the family, my mother said. I am family. You have your own home, your own company. You don't need this one. There it was. The same logic that had governed my childhood. I was capable, so I could be denied. Sierra was protected, so she must always be given more. My father leaned forward. You have done well. Better than any of us expected. Sierra is starting again. So was I when you removed me from the trust. You chose that. And Jasper? He said nothing. Did Sierra choose him? That is different. Of course it is. My mother began crying. We cannot abandon her. I looked at her carefully. 5 years ago, you abandoned a 3-year-old child. We made a terrible mistake. No, you made a choice. I let the silence remain. You had money. You had credit. You had property. Helping Tessa would not have made you homeless. But you believed refusing would teach me a lesson. My father looked away. Today, you also have choices. Sell the estate, pay the lender, move somewhere smaller, accept help with housing and medical care. You want to humiliate us, he said. No. I folded my hands on the table. I want to know why living in an apartment is humiliation when Malcolm and I did it for years. You know what this house represents. Yes. I thought of the closed doors, the returned wedding notice, and the room where I had knelt. It represents everything you protected instead of us. My mother reached toward me. Selena, please. We are still your parents. I looked at her hand but did not take it. You remembered that when you needed money. That is cruel. No, cruel was watching me beg for Tessa and returning to the party. My father stood. His cane struck the floor sharply. I will not accept charity disguised as punishment. The apartment is not punishment. It is help. You can save the house. I will not. For your sister's sake? No. For Urs? I looked directly at him. I will keep you safe. I will not keep you wealthy. He stared at me with the same disbelief he had shown when I walked out of the estate years earlier. Back then, he could not understand why I would choose love over security. Now he could not understand why I would choose boundaries over approval. My mother remained seated. What would make you change your mind? Nothing. Not even an apology? An apology given to purchase money is not an apology. Her face crumpled. I felt sorrow. That surprised me. I had expected satisfaction. Instead, I saw 2 aging people trapped inside the values they had built their lives around. They had lost the company, the son-in-law, and soon the house. Still, they could not imagine accepting a smaller life if it meant Sierra would not inherit the symbol of their status. My father walked toward the door. My mother rose slowly. Before leaving, she looked back at me. You could have been kinder. I thought of Robert signing the purchase agreement. I thought of June reading beside Tessa's hospital bed. I thought of Malcolm selling his truck before asking anyone for help. I offered you a safe place to live, I said. That is more kindness than you offered my daughter. My father opened the door. We will find another way. I hope you do. They left. Daniel waited until their footsteps disappeared. You did not have to offer the apartment. I know. Do you think they'll accept? No. Then why offer? Because I needed to know my answer came from a boundary, not hatred. That evening, I returned home earlier than usual. Tessa sat at the kitchen table doing homework while Malcolm cooked dinner. She looked up. Did you see Grandma and Grandpa Hartley? Yes. Are they moving here? No. She studied my face. Are they mad? Probably. Did you do something bad? The question stopped me. I sat beside her. No. Then why do you look sad? I searched for an answer an 8-year-old could carry, without inheriting my anger. Sometimes people ask for help, but they only want help that lets everything stay exactly the same. She frowned. I don't understand. That's all right. I brushed a curl from her forehead. They wanted me to save their big house so they could give it to Aunt Sierra. Why? Because they have spent a long time believing she needs more protection than other people. Tessa looked down at her notebook. Did they protect me when I was sick? Malcolm stopped moving near the stove. I felt the old pain rise, but I did not allow it to choose my words. No, I said. They didn't. Why? Because they were wrong about what family means. She thought for a moment. Grandpa Robert sold his garden. Yes. Was he scared? I think so. But he did it anyway. Yes. Tessa nodded as if she had solved something. Then he knew. Knew what? What family means. I pulled her into my arms. At that moment, I understood that the final decision had never truly been about my parents' house. It was about the kind of mother I intended to be. I could not teach Tessa that love required accepting endless harm. I could not teach her that blood erased responsibility. And I could not become cruel simply because cruel people had once held power over me. The Hartley estate was eventually sold through a negotiated process. My parents refused my offer of temporary housing. They moved into a smaller property, arranged with help from one of my father's former associates. Sierra did not receive the mansion. Jasper never returned to save her. There was no dramatic public apology, no newspaper confession, no moment when my parents suddenly became the people I had needed them to be. Real life rarely changes people that neatly. Sometimes, closure is not an apology. Sometimes it is the moment you stop waiting for one. Several months later, Reed plus Hart opened its new headquarters in Portland. The building was filled with natural light, reclaimed wood, and open spaces designed for collaboration. Malcolm had sketched the first version years earlier on the back of a restaurant receipt. At the opening, we invited employees, clients, community partners, and the people who had helped us when Tessa was sick. Mary Ann stood near the photographs of our first housing project. June carried a plate of food through the room, as though she had personally organized the event. Robert stood beside a photograph of his restored land. We had planted new fruit trees there, just as I had promised. Tessa sat in the front row between Malcolm and June, healthy enough to complain that the speeches were too long. When I stepped forward to speak, I did not tell the crowd that success was the best revenge. It was not. Revenge still allows the people who hurt you to remain at the center of your life. I spoke instead about the families who had trusted us to design their homes, shops, schools, and community spaces. I thanked the people who had given us money, meals, introductions, advice, and time. Then I looked at Robert and June. I was born into a family that believed inheritance was measured in property, I said. But the greatest inheritance my daughter received came from two people who were willing to give up property so she could live. Robert lowered his head. June cried openly. I looked at Tessa. My daughter will inherit more than land or money. She will inherit the knowledge that love is proven by what we are willing to do when staying becomes difficult. I do not know whether Gregory and Eleanor ever truly regretted what they did. I no longer need to know. Tessa is alive. Malcolm is still beside me. Robert and June stand in every family photograph that matters. I was born a Hartley. But the family that saved my daughter, rebuilt my faith, and taught me what love costs carried another name. By the time I understood that, I no longer needed revenge. I was already home,